I said Meghan Markle is, of course, a lifelong feminist, which she's demonstrated by marrying a prince and giving up her job.
Michael, we like to apologise. Unfortunately, William's hair was unable to make it this evening.
And I know some people are disappointed by the name Archie, but there's one person who's super excited, the Queen. Yeah, because you know for the last 9 months, she's been like, please don't be Jamal.
I think Harry's a f***ing twat.
Meghan said that she and Harry actually got married 3 days before the royal wedding. Great, now I feel like a fool for waking up at 5 a.m. to watch two married people get married.
It began with laughter, but it quickly turned into something far darker. What started as a harmless roast suddenly spiraled into a full-blown cultural reckoning. The moment the entertainment world stopped pretending, tore off the mask, and unleashed a tidal wave of brutal truths. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had spent years carefully building their narrative, a story crafted for sympathy, privilege dressed as victimhood, and fame disguised as independence. But then the jokes started, and when comedians, those who live and breathe on cutting through illusions, began to strike, the facade cracked. One joke became 2, then 3, and before long, it wasn't just comedy anymore. It was demolition. The first blow came in the form of a sharp quip aimed straight at Meghan's so-called feminism. For years, she had presented herself as a lifelong activist for women's rights, a bold voice against inequality. And yet, with one biting line, that entire image was called into question. Meghan Markle is of course a lifelong feminist, the joke went, which she's demonstrated by marrying a prince and giving up her job. The audience roared. But beneath the laughter was something deeper. Recognition. The contradiction was too glaring to ignore. How could a woman who championed female empowerment step so willingly into a role defined by centuries of hierarchy and dependency? The room laughed, but the dagger had landed. And then came another, a sly apology delivered with deadly precision. Unfortunately, William's hair was unable to make it this evening. Harmless on the surface, yes, but it planted seeds of doubt about the entire royal family, about their dignity, their supposed grandeur. One by one, the jokes stripped away the glamour, revealing not kings and queens but fallible humans, vulnerable to ridicule like anyone else. But the moment that truly ignited controversy came when the subject turned to Archie, Harry and Meghan's firstborn. For months, there had been whispers, speculation, and chatter about the baby's name, a detail that in the grand scheme of things should have been insignificant. Yet, when the joke hit, I know some people are disappointed by the name Archie, but there's one person who's super excited, the Queen. Because for the last 9 months, she's been praying, "Please don't be Jamal. Please don't be Jamal." The laughter was explosive, but so was the fallout. In one brutal moment, the joke didn't just land. It exposed the minefield Meghan and Harry had stepped into. Issues of race, tradition, and identity collided with comedy, leaving Meghan's carefully cultivated image as the victim of royal prejudice under siege from a different angle. Suddenly, it wasn't the royals being accused of bias, it was the comedians mocking Meghan's entire narrative. And that was only the beginning. Because while the crowd was still reeling, the knives kept coming. Harry himself was branded in the harshest possible way, described as weak, foolish, and blinded by infatuation. I think Harry is one comedian spat, sparing no mercy. The laughter was uncomfortable this time. It wasn't playful, it was scornful. And scorn is far harder to recover from than amusement. When Meghan revealed in an interview that she and Harry had secretly married 3 days before the official royal wedding, many had shrugged. But when the comedians got hold of that revelation, they turned it into humiliation. "Great," one quipped. "Now I feel like a fool for waking up at 5 in the morning to watch 2 married people get married." The absurdity was clear. Millions of people across the globe had tuned in for what they believed was a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle. A modern fairy tale. And with one careless admission, Meghan had reduced it to farce. But if that was a wound, then Jimmy Carr's intervention was the blade that twisted inside. With his trademark cruelty and precision, Carr went straight for Meghan's credibility. He branded her the fakest feminist alive. stripping her of the title she had clung to for years. And he didn't stop there. He ridiculed the couple for what had become their most infamous trait: living lavishly on other people's money. Harry and Meghan say they'd now like to split their time between spending your money in the UK and spending your money in Canada. The audience howled, but behind that laughter was a new narrative forming. Harry and Meghan weren't victims. They were opportunists. The dominoes began to fall. Once Jimmy Carr had given permission, others followed. The roast had turned into open season. Comedians, satirists, and commentators who had once hesitated, afraid of backlash, now piled on. The gloves were off. The gloves were off. SNL, America's most famous comedy institution, joined the fray. In a biting skit, Meghan's acting career was mocked to oblivion. "My brother's fiancée, Miss Meghan Markle, is on the American program Suits," one performer said. "The only difference between that show and this one is people actually watch this one." The audience roared, but the cruelty deepened as the jokes continued. Whenever the kids are being fussy and not going to bed, she puts on an episode of Suits and they're out. It was more than a jab at Meghan's past. It was the erasure of her Hollywood credibility. To mock her career as soporific was to imply that without Harry, she was nothing. Even her old friends weren't safe for her anymore. One former acting school acquaintance recounted a conversation in which Meghan had congratulated her on her career, only to add with unsettling self-awareness, "Well, mine took a little turn." Delivered with a smile, it was poison disguised as charm. What she meant was obvious. Her marriage had been her greatest career move. And for a woman who had sold herself as independent, that was devastating. But satire reached new heights when Britain's infamous puppet show Spitting Image joined in. Harry and Meghan were portrayed as delusional, giddy about escaping the rules of the monarchy, and yet comically unaware of how absurd their new life appeared. In California, we're just a regular couple living close to Oprah and far from the paparazzi, the puppets chirped. And then came the kicker. But not too far. The implication was clear. They weren't fleeing fame. They were chasing it. The puppets mocked Harry as a man-child, breaking furniture while trying to play polo in his living room, only to be scolded and controlled by Meghan. The laughter was cruel because it wasn't just comedy. It was reinforcement of a growing perception that Harry had surrendered his identity. The avalanche continued. At the Golden Globes, Joe Coy delivered the line that would echo across the entertainment industry. Turns out Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will still get paid millions of dollars for doing absolutely nothing. And that's just by Netflix. In a room full of hardworking actors, producers, and directors, the hypocrisy was deafening. The narrative crystallized in that moment. Meghan and Harry were parasites, feeding off privilege without producing anything of substance. Bill Maher, never one to pull punches, went even further. He called them out for their hypocrisy directly. They're ridiculous. They want it both ways. You can't be like, "Poor us, people were so mean," and then write a book about how much you don't want attention. The contradiction was undeniable. You can't beg for privacy and then sell your story to the highest bidder. You can't play the victim while cashing in on victimhood. Even Ricky Gervais joined in, recalling a performance attended by the likes of Paul McCartney, Madonna, Prince William, and Harry. Not one of them had paid. The point was brutal. Entitlement had always been part of Harry's DNA, and Meghan had simply embraced it. And then came South Park. What no comedian had dared to do in full, the cartoon did with glee. They made Harry and Meghan's hypocrisy the central plot of an episode. "We just want to be normal people. This attention is so hard," Harry's character moaned, while Meghan's cartoon doppelganger shouted about privacy, all while basking in the spotlight of celebrity culture. The show's genius lay in exaggeration, but the exaggeration was barely necessary. Flying around in private jets while screaming, "We want privacy," was exactly what the public already believed about them. And when the episode depicted them finding a quiet town, only to recoil in confusion at actual privacy, the satire landed with lethal force. It wasn't peace they wanted, it was control. Attention, yes, but only on their terms. And just when it seemed the mockery had reached its peak, Kelly Osbourne detonated the biggest bomb of all. In a fiery outburst, she tore Harry to shreds, delivering the most brutal takedown ever recorded on camera. Her words were merciless, her tone dripping with disgust, and what she revealed about her view of Harry's transformation left audiences gasping. This wasn't just comedy anymore, it was open contempt. But even that paled in comparison to what came next. Because when Chris Rock, the man who had himself endured public humiliation on the biggest stage in the world, stepped into the fray, the narrative changed forever. Meghan had built her entire brand on being a victim of racism, painting the royal family as cruel bigots who never welcomed her. But Chris Rock wasn't buying it. "It's the royal family," he sneered. "You didn't Google those, see?" The audience erupted, but the impact was nuclear. If Chris Rock, one of the most respected black voices in comedy, was dismissing Meghan's racism claims, then her entire victimhood narrative collapsed. He wasn't done. He mocked the idea that she had been blindsided, pointing out the absurdity of marrying into centuries of monarchy and then acting shocked that the institution was traditional. His words carried weight. They weren't just jokes. They were truth bombs. And this was only the beginning. This was only the beginning. It all started with laughter, but the laughter had teeth. What seemed like another harmless round of celebrity jokes quickly turned into something much darker. A cultural shift where the carefully polished image of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle began to fracture under the relentless pressure of ridicule. The moment comedians realized they could strike without fear, the floodgates opened. The illusion of victimhood, the polished speeches about feminism, independence, and oppression, all of it started to unravel. And as the roasts piled up, one truth became impossible to ignore. Meghan and Harry weren't untouchable anymore. They were fair game, and once the world saw them as punchlines, the destruction became inevitable. The first cracks appeared in subtle ways, disguised as playful jokes. Meghan was branded a lifelong feminist, and yet with a smirk and a pause, the punchline landed, which she's demonstrated by marrying a prince and giving up her job. The audience erupted in laughter, but beneath it was a deeper recognition, a sense that something didn't add up. Meghan had built her reputation on independence, ambition, and the idea of empowering women to build careers on their own terms. But she had traded hers in for tiaras and titles. The contradiction was obvious, and comedy thrives on contradiction. With that single joke, the pedestal she stood on wobbled. From there, the roasts spread like wildfire. The jabs at William's receding hairline seemed light-hearted at first, but they softened the audience, prepared them for harsher blows. And then came Archie. The choice of name should have been trivial, something private, something celebrated. Instead, it became a weapon. I know some people are disappointed by the name Archie, but there's one person who's super excited, the Queen. Because for the last 9 months, she's been praying, "Please don't be Jamal. Please don't be Jamal." The laughter was explosive, but the undertone was clear. Meghan's carefully crafted narrative about the royals' racism had just been flipped upside down. The very topic she had used to secure sympathy was now being mocked in front of millions. The audience wasn't booing, they were laughing, and that was worse. The assaults grew sharper, moving from wordplay to outright contempt. Harry was labeled weak, foolish, and emasculated. "I think Harry is a..." One comedian spat, the words hanging in the air like a slap. This wasn't satire, it was venom. The laughter that followed wasn't the cheerful kind, it was cruel. The kind of laughter that signals not joy but scorn. And once scorn enters the room, reputations don't recover. Even Meghan's supposed fairy tale wedding was turned into farce. When she admitted in an interview that she and Harry had secretly married 3 days before the public spectacle, the revelation was meant to sound romantic. Instead, it made millions of viewers feel duped. The comedian seized on it instantly. "Great," one quipped. "Now I feel like a fool for waking up at 5 in the morning to watch 2 married people get married." The audience roared, but Meghan's credibility shrank. The magic of that televised wedding, one of the most watched events of the decade, now looked like a staged performance for cameras. Jimmy Carr's entry into the fray turned the simmering ridicule into an inferno. Known for his merciless wit, Carr didn't hesitate to go straight for Meghan's central narrative. He called her the fakest feminist alive, a line that gutted her image as a champion of women's rights. He piled on by mocking their finances, quipping that Harry and Meghan wanted to split their time between spending your money in the UK and spending your money in Canada. The laughter was sharp, but the implications were devastating. They weren't self-sufficient royals forging a new path. They were freeloaders, parasites feeding off the public purse. And once Carr said it aloud, others realized they could too. The domino effect was unstoppable. SNL, America's comedy institution, joined in. Their skits reduced Meghan's acting career to dust. My brother's fiancée, Miss Meghan Markle, is on the American program Suits. The only difference between that show and this one is people actually watch this one. The crowd laughed, but the cruelty deepened with each line. Whenever the kids are being fussy and not going to bed, she puts on an episode of Suits, and they're out. It wasn't just mockery, it was erasure. Meghan's Hollywood past was stripped of all glamour and repainted as mediocrity. Without Harry, the implication went she was nothing. Even her old acquaintances couldn't resist twisting the knife. A former acting school peer recalled how Meghan once congratulated her on her career with an eerie comment. Well, mine took a little turn. What she meant was obvious. She hadn't climbed the ladder on merit. She had skipped it by marrying into royalty. And when a supposed feminist is accused of advancing by marriage rather than merit, the damage is permanent. Satire shows soon joined in. Britain's infamous spitting image portrayed Harry and Meghan as delusional, insisting they were just a normal couple, while bragging about living near Oprah. Harry's puppet smashed furniture playing polo indoors, only to be scolded by Meghan. The subtext was brutal. Harry wasn't free. He was emasculated, a man-child ruled by his wife. The laughter wasn't aimed at their glamour, but at their absurdity. Then, Joe Coy delivered the line that crystallized the industry's contempt. Turns out Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will still get paid millions of dollars for doing absolutely nothing. And that's just by Netflix. In a room full of actors and directors who actually worked for their paychecks, the hypocrisy was unforgivable. The narrative shifted permanently. Harry and Meghan weren't hardworking, brave trailblazers. They were freeloaders cashing in on their titles. Bill Maher pushed it further, calling out their hypocrisy. They want it both ways. You can't be like, poor us, people were so mean, and then write a book about how much you don't want attention. The audience laughed, but the truth in his words lingered. You cannot demand privacy while simultaneously selling your story to the world. Ricky Gervais piled on, recalling a performance attended by Harry, William, Paul McCartney, and Madonna, all sitting in the back without paying. His point was razor sharp. Entitlement had always been Harry's default, and Meghan had only leaned into it. And then came the nuclear bomb. South Park. The animated series mocked Harry and Meghan's hypocrisy so thoroughly it left the couple humiliated. They were portrayed flying around in private jets, screaming about privacy, demanding to be left alone while appearing everywhere. My Instagram-loving wife has always wanted her privacy, Harry's cartoon whined, the irony dripping from every syllable. The final insult came when they found the perfect quiet town only to recoil in horror when actual privacy meant irrelevance. The point was undeniable. They never wanted peace. They wanted attention, but only on their terms. Just when it seemed the mockery had peaked, Chris Rock entered the scene. Meghan's entire brand had leaned heavily on claims of racism within the royal family. But Rock, one of the most respected black voices in comedy, demolished it in minutes. "It's the royal family," he scoffed. "You didn't Google those." The audience howled. Then came the kill shot. He imitated Meghan's complaint. They had speculated about how dark Archie's skin would be. "That's not racist," Rock laughed. "Even black families want to know how brown the baby's going to be." The crowd erupted, and Meghan's narrative collapsed. Her biggest complaint, reframed as normal curiosity, was stripped of its power. If Chris Rock wasn't buying her story, why should anyone else? That opened the door for white comedians to go even harder. Colin Jost mocked Harry's choices with a devastating comparison. Elon built electric cars. He's going to Mars. Why is he even involving himself with Twitter? It would be like if the Prince of England gave it all up just to marry an actor from Suits. The laughter cut like a blade. Harry's great love story was being compared to Elon Musk's worst career decision, and it didn't stop there. Jost continued with a fake Suits spin-off, Meghan balancing law with caring for an unemployed immigrant. The line became legendary. In one stroke, Harry was reduced from prince to dead weight. Simon Brodkin, another British comic, delivered perhaps the most devastating verdict. I watched the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. Before I watched it, I wasn't a fan. But after hearing their side of the story, I hate them. The honesty was lethal. Their documentary, meant to humanize them, had the opposite effect. It made people despise them even more. He mocked their H&M nicknames as fake branding, sneered at their whining over security costs, and admitted that after 6 episodes of self-pity, he wanted to attack them. It wasn't just mockery. It was rage. Then came Joe Rogan, blindsided when Harry suddenly called him out for vaccine misinformation. Rogan was stunned. Do you know how weird it is when a prince knows your name? He asked, laughing at the absurdity. Even he joked that Harry's words made him second-guess himself. Did I? I might have. The absurdity was undeniable. A prince was punching down at a podcaster looking petty, desperate, and insecure. But the true annihilation came when Kelly Osbourne finally snapped. Her rant was pure fury, unfiltered and raw. I think Harry is a... She spat. The host laughed nervously, but Kelly wasn't joking. She accused Harry of constant whining, mocked his claims of unique suffering, and shredded his attempt to rebrand himself as a saint. You were the prince of a goddamn country who dressed up as a Nazi, and now you're trying to come back as the Pope. Suck it. It was a knockout punch, the kind that leaves nothing standing. In that moment, any shred of public sympathy for Harry evaporated. What unfolded wasn't just comedy. It was a cultural execution. Meghan and Harry had tried to control their story, to build a brand on grievances. But comedians turned those grievances into punchlines. Every contradiction became fodder. Every attempt at relatability became evidence of privilege. And once the laughter turned against them, it didn't stop. The industry that once courted them now saw them only as content. Punchlines to fill a set, symbols of hypocrisy to mock endlessly. They had wanted both worlds. Fame without criticism, privacy with publicity, wealth without responsibility. But the world had stopped believing. And in the end, the greatest irony was this. Meghan and Harry had wanted to be the narrators of their own story. Instead, they became characters in everyone else's jokes. And in Hollywood, nothing is more fatal than becoming the punchline. Fatal than becoming the punchline. This is Crown and Controversy, unraveling the royals, one scandal at a time. Don't forget to subscribe.